There are few things that can lead to lifelong injuries, deformities, and agonising pain. Acid attacks are a form of assault that are not a recent phenomenon, but one that has shifted over time. In today's video, we will look at the history of acid attacks, the disturbing consequences for survivors, and the changes being made to combat this horrendous crime. It's perhaps helpful to start with a brief description of what an acid attack actually is. The term for an acid attack against a person is vitriolage, that is, the deliberate throwing of acid with the intention to kill or deface the victim. Vitriolage gets its name from vitriol, otherwise known as sulfuric acid, the acid commonly used in such attacks. Though the term acid attack is used, in some cases alkalis such as ammonia are used in the attacks. Some have therefore seen it more appropriate to use the term chemical attacks as to cover all types. But the most common choice is sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is a highly corrosive chemical that causes severe skin burns, can irritate the nose and throat, and cause difficulties breathing if inhaled. If it gets into the eyes, it can cause blindness, and can burn holes in the stomach if swallowed. It acts as an incredibly strong dehydrator, burning away water in the skin. If a person is victim to such an attack, it's vital that clean running water is used to wash away as much of the chemical as possible. Clothing may also need to be cut away as to avoid it sitting on the person's skin for too long. As for the surgery needed, the key is removing the dead and damaged tissue as it prevents infection. If the burns are extensive, skin grafts will be needed, using undamaged skin from other parts of the body to cover the wounded areas. In more severe cases, flap surgery is needed, where tissue, along with blood vessels, is moved from one area to another to reconstruct lost volume and structure. Over time, survivors will often need multiple scar revision surgeries and contracture release procedures. For many, surgeries offer not only medical relief, but also psychological. Cosmetic reconstruction of damaged features can be just as vital to the recovery process. Overall, acid attack victims may undergo as many as 50 surgeries throughout their lifetime, highlighting the extensive damage that this acid can deal. Easy access to the unregulated sale of sulfuric acid in the mid-19th century would see acid attacks become a deadly form of assault. One of the earliest examples of acid attack was a form of industrial protest. Employers who went back on their deals, who broke striking workers, or who earned the wrath of the union trades. There are examples of striking cotton spinners in Preston, England, using acid to destroy factories and throw acid in the faces of both their bosses and scab workers. It became synonymous with trade unions for a time, with rumours often spreading that union bosses were encouraging the attacks as a means to delegitimise strike action. After these attacks, the British Parliament made the throwing of acid on a person a capital offence, with their sentences including deportation to Australia. There was also a strange phenomenon in 19th century Britain. Men would throw acid on a woman's clothing in a bid to burn them away and to reveal the skin underneath. These deviant acts were seen by some historians as an expression of sexual or emotional dysfunction. Robbers too would throw acid onto targets' clothing as part of a mugging, but there are a number of cases where such robberies went wrong, including the high-profile murder of a Danish embassy official in 1894. In the 1870s in France, acid attacks were often documented as crimes of passion and became increasingly common. There are accounts in magazine articles and letters detailing how women would throw acid into the faces of their former lovers. Such crimes would often be sensationalized in the press, going into detail about the attacker, her motives, her appearance, leading to copycats eager to garner the same attention. It was said that these crimes were often unpunished and seen as almost acceptable. As such, acid attacks became known as a crime exclusively committed by women, though in reality there was a fairly even split of men and women committing these crimes. But the publicity and the moral outrage at acid attacks in the 19th century led to a number of countries limiting the sale of sulfuric acid or making the specific act of throwing acid its own offence. But the practice would still endure, though in the United Kingdom there would only be a handful of cases reported each year. One of the highest profile examples of an acid attack was carried out on Prince Leopold Clement in 1915. The prince was in a relationship with a common-born woman by the name of Camilla Rybacker. Camilla became increasingly annoyed by the prince's refusal to marry her, not wishing to be her lover. The prince's promises of marriage were never followed through, as by doing so, he would have had to forfeit his titles for marrying a commoner. Eventually, a settlement was reached, where Camilla would be paid millions in compensation. But Camilla had no intention of accepting this money. She wanted the prince. The prince agreed to meet with Camilla, but Camilla brought with her a revolver and a bottle of sulfuric acid. Rather than sign the check, she fired 5 shots into the prince and smashed the bottle of acid into his face. Remarkably, the prince survived the attack, though the attack had melted much of his face and had even destroyed one of his eyes. The prince would go on to live in agony for 6 months before he finally succumbed to his wounds. But cases of acid attacks would start to take hold all around the world. It's reported that the first acid attack in India was in 1920, a country that continues to suffer with high rates of attacks to this day. There appears to be a correlation between the rates of acid attacks and the ease of purchasing the deadly acid. Where it is not regulated, it can be bought over the counter, and because of this, acid attacks remain all too common today. The 20th century saw acid attacks rise sharply in certain parts of the world, notably in Latin America and some parts of Africa, along with areas of Southeast Asia. In countries like India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, acid would become the weapon of choice for imposing male dominance over women. During the 1970s and 80s, there was a massive spike in these attacks in India and Bangladesh. This coincided with the urbanization in these countries, and with it, traditional gender roles being challenged. Women were increasingly pushing their own independence, whether it be their careers, education, or choosing their own partners. For some men, feeling dishonoured, acid would prove to be a brutal and horrendous tool of oppression. Acid attacks would become a form of punishment, leaving the victim in agony, scarred. Often in cases where men were rejected, the facial scarring would be seen as a way to devalue the survivor, a desperate and disturbing bid to state, "If I can't have you, no one will want you." The country with the highest rate of these attacks is Colombia, with over 100 reported cases every year. The vast majority of victims are women, with similar motives of rejection and fragile ego being some of the main causes. One notable survivor of an acid attack was Natalie Ponce de Leon. In 2014, she was attacked by her neighbour, who threw a litre of sulfuric acid all over her body and her face. Natalie had rejected the neighbour's advances, who then began making death threats against her before carrying out the disturbing crime. A quarter of Natalie's body was burned, and like many survivors, she required dozens of surgeries. But this attack would not stop or silence Natalie. She began to campaign for change in Colombia. At the time of her attack, there was no specific crime for throwing acid, and it was treated as a common assault by Colombian courts. Natalie's campaign succeeded in the passing of a law that can sentence offenders for up to 50 years, and has gone on to campaign for worldwide change, including training for first responders in how to deal with an acid attack and aftercare help for the survivors. As some of you may know, we do have a crime channel too, just called Disturbin', where we have covered a number of cases involving acid. One is the case of Katie Piper, who was attacked by someone paid by her ex-boyfriend. The old mentality of, "If I can't have you, then no one can," was the motive. This occurred in the UK. Katie was walking down the street when she was splashed with acid. Her attacker is now walking the streets. We also have the case of Ines Antonio. She was attacked in South Africa by her ex-boyfriend, a similar mentality. South African officials almost managed to cover up the case and nearly allowed her ex to walk free after the attack. They claimed they had lost the docket used in the court proceedings, and that the trial may not go ahead. It was only after the media reported the story ferociously that this magical docket was found again. Ines now lives with constant pain, discomfort and fear. Many people who experience these attacks are not just physically scarred, but also mentally scarred. Anxiety, depression and other mental illnesses are not only common, but a part of life after such an attack. But these are just some individual cases. As many as 1,500 people each year are victims to acid attacks. Each story is just as harrowing. For those interested, there are plenty of personal stories of attacks available, and they are well worth listening to. Acid attacks remain one of the more disturbing crimes, and one that will likely remain a problem for the near future. It would seem that tackling ease of access to deadly chemicals would be key to eliminating the problem, but for now, the human impact of acid attacks must never be forgotten.